All right, since we've hit noon and we're probably going to have some people who are joining us here in the next few minutes, I'll just go through a quick introduction for everybody and also a couple of announcements. Hopefully we do have some more people joining us in the next few minutes, but thanks to everybody who joined us. I hope you have something to eat, some lunch or something like that. I already had to grab my coffee for the afternoon. Yeah, so this webinar is keeping your team motivated. We have Ann Brackett and Alicia Wojciuch from Strengths University joining us. So a lot of this was already covered in the invite, and thank you for registering, but we've been busting it. We've been working so hard. We've got everything set up for the semester. We've got everything set up for success for our students, but what about ourselves? What about our team? What about our colleagues? Burnout is a very real thing, obviously, this time of year. It's a very real thing, obviously, with the pandemic that we're in right now. Just to give you some context, we've got our Allied Health Conference that's coming up next month, and our instructor from over at State Fair Community College is basing that health conference on the concept of burnout. This is an issue that is across industries right now. Doesn't matter what job you're in, but especially as we're in the first few weeks of the semester when we've been planning and we've been trying to get everything in line. This is one of those moments where we do need to be looking out for our colleagues, looking out for ourselves, and looking out for our teams. So I'm excited to hear what Ann and Alicia have for us today. Going to give a shout out to Strengths Leadership Institute, which I believe starts next week. So if you are interested in that at all, if you hear something today that speaks to you, if you just really, really like Ann and Alicia's style, which I'm sure you all will, hit them up. They're going to have more information on the Leadership Institute for you later, but keep that in mind as you're listening to all of this. I'm going to do another call out for registrations for our annual convention. The MCCA annual convention is going to be November 10th through the 12th in Branson. We are right in the middle of planning tons of fun stuff. We've got really excellent breakout sessions that have already been announced. And then we have more breakout sessions and workshops that we are working on right now that are going to be announced at a later date. So we're going to have all kinds of options for everybody. We're going to have awards. We're finally getting back to in-person collaboration and brainstorming and networking. So we're really excited for that. We are, almost quite literally 2 months from that. Again, that's November 10th through the 12th. And then finally, if you have an idea, if you have any feedback, if you have a request for the types of presentations that we're hearing from, or if this is really excellent today and really speaks to you, and again, I'm not questioning whether it's going to be excellent, but if you are, if the feedback is basically, I want more of this, please reach out to me. My email, it's pretty easy. It's just cliff.judy@mccatoday.org. I'll put that in the chat. I'll also put my cell phone number in the chat. As the professional development person and the member engagement person, I want to hear that feedback. I am trying to soak up as much as I possibly can in my first few months at MCCA. So please don't be shy. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ann and Alicia.
Wonderful.
Fantastic.
Thank you for that welcome, Cliff. Ann's going to get our screen set up and ready to go. All right, now it's your turn, Ann.
Oh, fantastic. Excellent. So hopefully you can see my screen. Normally I have two screens. I'm working from somewhere else today. So hopefully you're seeing what you're supposed to see. Excellent. Okay, so like Cliff said, we've been busting it. We've been working August, exhausting. And here we are finally mid-September. And the question is, like, how are you going to keep yourself and your team motivated throughout the year? So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Indeed. So we know we can't see you, but you can raise your hand. You can make a tally. If any of these statements that we're getting ready to run through have been part of your experience lately. So raise your hand or, make a tally for yourself. If you have ever had your team get excited about a change or a new initiative, but then they had trouble following on the steps and the tasks that were necessary to make it happen. Think about if you have ever felt like you or your team weren't living up to your full potential. You knew that you're working hard, but there was more that you could do. If you have ever felt like you or your team members were too busy putting out all the fires to really be strategic and help your students succeed. Think about if you have ever had team members that were consistently not living up to your expectations. I think we've all had an experience like that. If you've ever wanted to focus on team development, but other things just keep getting in the way. And then if you've ever felt like no matter how hard you and your team work, you can never get ahead, right? If any of those things have been part of your experience lately, we feel you. We totally understand. That's why we are here. That's why we're talking about this idea of being motivated in this time today. And so we're going to talk through some strategies around these areas.
Okay, so yes, lots of issues coming up. Exhaustion, not living up to our potential, feeling like we're kind of just cogs in a machine and we just have to keep grinding through, but never quite making it through. So the bad news is you can't actually motivate other people. But per this quote, you can't motivate people. You can only create a context in which people are motivated. So what we're really going to focus on today is how do you create that context? How do you create that culture or environment for you and your team where you can feel that sense of motivation to move forward?
Indeed. So again, thinking about this idea of motivation, it's an intrinsic, internal, powerful thing that we have. But again, we can't motivate others. We can't build that intrinsic motivation. But again, like the quote, we can build that context that helps us. The other challenge with motivation, when we're thinking about each individual person, is that motivation, what is going to spark that for each individual person is going to be different. And so again, we're going to talk through some of the ways that you address all of those differences and really work to help create that context for folks. And then again, thinking about motivation and change and wanting to help people is that you really have to help the conscious and the subconscious mind be on the same page to create change. And I don't know if I want the superpower, but none of us have the superpower to control someone else's brain. Again, we can give them tools and help work to align the subconscious and conscious as we're helping lead folks. And we'll talk through again some more of that as we continue on in this time together today.
Okay, so the last thing Alicia said was talking about our minds, our brain. And maybe you're like, what on earth are you talking about? So let's talk for a minute about your conscious mind, because we're in higher ed, right? So why do people come to us? Why do you go to college? Because you want to grow and develop your conscious mind. Like, I'm thinking important thoughts about important things. That's your conscious mind. So let's learn a little bit about that mind. It can process 40 bits of data per second. And that sounds awesome, right? And it is awesome. However, our conscious mind is only driving the bus, and we are the bus, 1 to 5% of the time. And I'm no mathematician, but that's a really low percentage. And our conscious mind is the wheelhouse of creativity, innovation, and also free will. And when I talk about free will, you'll understand a little bit more when Alicia talks about the unconscious mind in a second. But we're really talking about the ability to, okay, what am I doing every day? And is it getting me where I want to go? No, it isn't. How can I make a change? So the ability to really understand our behaviors, our ways of thinking, and be able to assess whether it helps us or not. And that can only happen in the conscious mind. But let's talk about that unconscious mind.
Right. So the subconscious mind, like Ann mentioned, conscious mind, 40 bits of data per second, right? That's a lot. But when we think about our subconscious mind, it is 40 million bits of data per second. And so I'm sure we've all had that experience where, again, we're in the same place, we're in a routine, and we're just not even taking in, not consciously aware of what we're doing. Again, it's because our subconscious mind has taken that and just put it into programming. We're going to talk about that. Again, when we think about the subconscious mind, it is driving that other 95 to 99% of our activity. again, that's a lot, right? And we think about the way that our bodies work, the things that we do, some of that makes sense, right? Like it would be overwhelming and exhausting to have to think about, how do I chew gum? How do I breathe? How do I do these things, right? So that's some of the subconscious. But even more than that, it's the autopilot places that we get to. And so again, it's some of those big bodily system autopilots. And some of it is the routines and the things that we do at work and the thought patterns that we have about work and what we're doing. And we'll continue to, again, talk about how does all this tie together? What does this have to do with motivation? All those things. But again, thinking about the importance of our subconscious mind, that it is the programming that we operate by, right? And so if you think about, an analogy of your cell phone, right? The operating system that it has, when we get stuck in an old system that's no longer serving us, we've got to figure out a way to update that. Again, thinking about just putting this into kind of a tangible piece. Again, when we think about driving, right? Maybe we're not doing that as much as we used to, but if you think about driving, the commute to and from work, if you take the same road every day, sometimes you can get home. I'm sure we've all had this experience. You get home and you're like, I'm not entirely sure how I got here. All I know is I left work and now I'm in my driveway, right? Like it's just that subconscious because we take the same route. Our brain knows what to expect, right? Nothing really out of the ordinary happened. So it didn't kind of spark a conscious thought really. But then maybe something has happened. Maybe there's construction, or maybe you looked at ways and there's an accident and you have to take a different route home. And even if that route takes the actual same amount of time as normal, oftentimes that feels incredibly longer because your brain is having to work more. It's taking in all of that data. And so time feels different because again, we're not just on autopilot. And so even if it's the same, hopefully you have a short commute. If it's the same, 15 or 20 minutes as the typical route that you take every day, that other route, still 15 or 20 minutes, feels very different because our brain is having to take in all of that information and process it consciously instead of subconsciously. So again, as we think about motivation and why are we talking about this, we promise it's all going to tie together, but just kind of have that framework and that thought in your mind about why the subconscious and conscious are so important.
Absolutely. And so like we've just basically talked about, our title was a lie. How do we motivate people? You don't. So what can you do? Because otherwise, why are we here? So the things you can do are focus on engagement, because that's something you actually have the ability to change. And you can focus on creating effective habits and systems, not efficient, because efficient is I have a list of things to do. How quickly can I do it? Effective is what is the best way to utilize our resources and get it done then the quickest way possible.
Indeed. And so some of the ways that we are going to talk about, again, creating the context for folks to be able to feel motivated. If we take a step back, of course, Ann and I are both Gallup certified strengths coaches, and Ann is also a certified engagement champion. So you can find different types of surveys or, instruments to measure employee engagement, because we, I guess, drink the Gallup Kool-Aid, if you will. We use their information and research, and because they've been doing it for over 75 years. So again, Gallup puts folks into three main categories, three types of employees. So we have engaged folks. Those are the people that are coming to work every day. They are really striving to make everything they do better, to make it more effective and efficient, right? Both of those things. They are really driving the train, driving the bus forward. Then we also have some folks who are not engaged. They're there, they're coming to work, but they're not the best and the brightest. They might have the potential to be, but in this time and space, they're just not. They're just showing up, doing the thing, and that's about it. And then we have folks who are actively disengaged. These could be folks who are burnt out. These could be folks who have something going on and they're just generally in a, for lack of a better term, in a toxic place and just really not adding value to what we're doing. In fact, maybe actively working against what we're doing by bringing others down, And so thinking about a way to, the reason we have a rowboat image here, thinking about this as your team on a rowboat, right? The folks that we're working with, our team members who are engaged and who are working towards our goal. Those are the folks we're rowing forward. We're in it together. We're communicating. Again, we know we need each other to get forward. The folks who are not engaged, they're there, but maybe they're just holding their oars up in the air. They're just not really contributing. And then the folks who are actively disengaged are rowing against what we're doing. Another way to think about this, again, very tangibly thinking about real life scenario. Let's imagine we're walking into work tomorrow morning and we see a piece of trash on the ground. And if we are engaged, we're going to notice and think, oh, there's a piece of trash. I should pick it up and throw it away. And you do. Because again, you're engaged. You want the institution, the place that you're working, your team, the environment that you're in to be better than you found it. You want to make that impact. Folks who are not engaged are going to think, look, there's a piece of trash. I hope somebody picks that up. And then the folks who are actively disengaged are the folks that are just dropping their trash, maybe even actively throwing their trash on the ground because they're just not invested. They just don't really care or don't have the energy or whatever it is, but there's something that's keeping them from actively, positively participating in what it is that we're doing. So as we think about employees, those are the three kind of categories that we're talking about in this idea of engagement and creating this context for folks to be able to feel motivated.
Excellent. So you as a supervisor actually have a lot of impact on engagement. In fact, Gallup has shown that 70% of employee engagement is impacted by their direct supervisor. And even if you think, oh, I'm not actually doing anything to work on engagement right now, it doesn't matter. You're still impacting it in those ways, in that 70%. It just may not be to get people to be engaged, because certainly, maybe, perhaps, I know I certainly have had a supervisor that drove my engagement down. And not to say that you're doing this, or definitely not actively doing it. It's just what happens by the day-to-day decisions that we make and the culture that we work in and the environment that we are surrounded by. And the bad news is Gallup has found that 35% of managers are engaged, which is not even 50%. So that's not great. And Gallup has also found that supervisors are more stressed than the people they supervise. So really, it's not terribly surprising that not that many managers are engaged. And the problem there, it's a trickle-down problem, is that when you're not engaged as a manager, and of course, like per the title of this webinar, we are talking about your team, but we're talking about you too. And so as we talk about these engagement points, these are things that you need to consider for yourself as well, because employees that are supervised by an engaged manager are almost 60% more likely to be engaged. So if you are not engaged, the chances of your team being engaged go way down. If you are engaged or can get to be engaged, the chances that they will be engaged go up, which is a good thing.
Indeed. And so again, we're going to talk through some strategies both for you to be thinking about for your personal development, your personal, hopefully nobody is feeling completely burnt out, but I think we're all experiencing some symptoms of it. And so being able to take away some tools that can benefit you, like Cliff mentioned, taking care of your colleagues, even if it's not somebody you directly supervise, you're going to walk away with some tools around this as well. And one of the easiest ways to be thinking about this is always treat your employees exactly as you want them to treat your best customers. So Stephen Covey, of course, said that, and really just thinking about how do we want our teams to be treating our students? We have to find ways to be able to treat our teams like that as well.
Okay, so just like we use Clifton Strengths for our work, we also use Gallup's Q12. And basically, this is an engagement survey, and I don't know how many engagement surveys, if any, you've ever taken, but there's some that are hundreds of questions long. And that is both tedious for people filling it out, as well as when you get those results back, what even are you supposed to do with that information? Gallup has identified the 12 elements of engagement that they have found make the biggest impact. So the 12, and we're going to go through those. And that's not to say they're the only things that impact engagement, but they are the most bang for your buck. So that makes it really great for supervisors, because when you know this, and even if you don't actually know the engagement level of your team with a number, it still gives you some very tangible questions to think about and come up with some action plans to really help your team become more engaged and help yourself become more engaged. And they break up these 12 questions into basic needs, individual needs, teamwork, and growth. And we're going to walk you through these pretty quickly, but we just want to give you an idea of some ways that you can actively work to improve the engagement of your team, your colleagues, and yourself.
Indeed. So as we think about this idea of basic needs, the first question is, I know what's expected of me at work. I think one of the things that I have noticed as we have been doing coaching with folks and have finished up our summer Supervisor Institute is that this changing landscape, the pandemic has forced a change on everything that we do. Sometimes even prior to the pandemic, folks weren't entirely sure. Yeah, I know what my job description says, but I'm not entirely sure what this other duties is assigned truly means, because it has shifted, it has changed. When you change, maybe you've had employee turnover, and the person that used to be in this role had excellent skills in something, and so it kind of became part of that person's role, even though it's not officially listed as a job duty, right? And so this is a place for us to really be intentional and look at, what are these job descriptions that we have for folks? Is this truly what people are doing? And is it truly what's expected of them? And the more that we can make those expectations clear and known, the more people can rise to them. And again, it is one of the basic needs that employees, that drives employee engagement. And you might even be experiencing in this moment, I feel like everything is different and I'm not entirely sure what is most expected of me. And so again, be thinking about, as the folks that you're leading, be thinking about for yourself, do we truly know what's expected of us in our jobs? The second question when we think about basic needs is that I have the materials and the equipment to do my work right. And this one sometimes can feel a little challenging, because maybe somebody's saying, no, I really need this new software, or I really need this new thing, or I really need more people, right, to make this happen. And while you might not, as a supervisor, have a magic money tree to provide all the equipment that folks are saying, I need this to do my job right, having that understanding of what people need and what they're looking for really can help you advocate and help your team feel heard, right? And so even if they're asking for tools that you don't have in this moment or the budget to get, having that conversation can be incredibly empowering, and again, let people feel heard. Same thing for you, thinking about, are there tools or equipment that you need to do your job right that you don't have? Sometimes we get, again, so stuck in what it is that we do, or the way that we've always done it, or this is what I have, so I have to make this work. Sometimes taking a step back and reflecting on that can be one of the things that helps us understand that this system or this thing that I'm using is not actually the equipment I need to do this right, and it's impacting my engagement, right? And so again, those are the two questions around basic needs on the Q12.
So when we move up to the individual, the third question is, at work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. And in a nutshell, what they're talking about here are your strengths, are your talents. And the graph that I just popped up on the screen is actually showing the supervisor effect. And if you look all the way to the right, it talks about, my supervisor ignores me. So what happens if you just decide to ignore all your people? Now, I don't know many people, especially in higher ed, that are just ignoring everyone, but there's enough in different places that Gallup has studied this. And the yellow on each graph represents actively disengaged, which of course is the, we don't want those at all because it takes out a lot of time and energy, spreads bad vibes, all that sort of things. So if you as a supervisor just straight up ignore everyone, huge, almost half of your team probably would be actively disengaged. And the engaged portion, very, very tiny, like 2%. Now, again, I don't think any of you are really doing this, but I want to kind of just show you on the spectrum, like how this changes as you change your mindset as a supervisor. So if you as a supervisor, and this is true too, however your supervisor is treating you, if they don't ignore you, they acknowledge your existence and they interact with you on a regular basis, but they're just focusing on weaknesses or your negative characteristics, like, oh, thanks for that report. These are the things that you need to fix. Or annual review. Well, okay, fine. You did that. These things are acceptable. These things you got to work on. Then all of a sudden engagement jumps up to 45% just by having that interaction. And the actively disengaged goes down to 22%, which is again, not great. You know, if you had a staff of 10 people, having 2 of them being actively disengaged, like that's still a huge pain in your patootie. So we don't want that. So if we look all the way at the left, my supervisor focuses on my strengths or positive characteristics. So all of a sudden, actively disengaged folks down to 1%. That's phenomenal. And engagement goes up to 61%. So the vast majority of your team would be engaged. And basically what this means is we all have talents, we all have strengths, but in your job, on a daily basis, do you actually get to use them? Or is your time and day consumed doing a bunch of stuff that is what we would call outside of your strength zone? So this directly impacts the engagement of yourself, your colleagues, and your team. This ability to focus on what you do best every day at work.
So continuing on in that vein and with the next question under individual, in the last 7 days, I have received recognition or praise for doing good work. And so again, when we think about as a supervisor, the very important impact that we can make on our team simply by noticing the things that people do well. Now, again, we know everybody is stretched to the max, that things are incredibly challenging right now. Again, thinking back to those initial questions that we asked, feeling like we're always just working to put out fires. We hear you and we understand that. But again, thinking about the vast impact that you have on the folks that you're leading, just by being able to pay attention and give recognition for people doing good work. This doesn't mean we're lying to our employees. It doesn't mean, you know, we're making stuff up, but we're observing and giving people that positive feedback. The next one, my supervisor or anyone at work seems to care about me as a person. So again, thinking about the folks that we're leading, we don't have to know the intimate details of their life, especially if they're not somebody that really wants to share those things at work. But there are still ways to care about somebody as a person and to demonstrate that to them so that they know, right? So these are some of the individual questions. And then the third one that we have, Gallup has, is that there is somebody at work who encourages my development. And so again, if you are supervising and leading people, imperative that this is part of the leadership conversations that we're having. And again, thinking about this idea that we also work with colleagues and people. And so this someone doesn't have to be only a supervisor, right? So you have the ability to partner with somebody and to really start encouraging development in each other. One of the great and easy ways, really to, again, be intentional about what it is that we're doing to drive forward our engagement.
Okay, so now we move over to the teamwork portion of this hierarchy. So Q7, at work, my opinion seems to count. So really, because when you think about engagement, it's the psychological investment in the organization. And if you feel like no one listens to your opinions, your thoughts, your feelings, why would you be invested in that? You know, if you think about if you have a friend who pretty much didn't care what you thought, you really wouldn't be too invested in that friendship. So same thing here. Q8, the mission or purpose of my company makes me feel that my job is important. So not that, because all schools have these lofty mission statements, vision statements, that sort of thing. How is it connected, what you do on a daily basis, to what you're trying to achieve? Do people know that? Or do you really, because again, we're so much huge to-do lists, and not just this is my job, I was hired to do to-do lists, but all the other like people who've left and you've accumulated their responsibilities. Do you just kind of feel like a cog just trying to get through everything, and you don't really feel connected to that? That can make a huge impact on engagement. And Q9, my associates or fellow employees are committed to doing quality work. And before I really understood these, as a supervisor, I didn't really understand the impact and how important it was for me to hold my team accountable. Like I knew that, so-and-so, say Betsy, was not really doing the best job. And I'm like, how do I talk? They're not, they haven't killed anybody, / they're not doing their job, but they should do better. Well, I've got 10 employees and 9 of them are doing a great job. One, Betsy, but, I come up with excuses not to talk to Betsy about her performance. What I didn't understand is that Betsy's not great performance, her meh performance, is actually impacting everyone else. Because, I think we've all been in this situation where you're on a team and you're doing your best. You're putting in 100% or however much percent you have left, during a pandemic. And you look over, and again, Betsy, it's like, what does Betsy do every day? Like, isn't she supposed to be doing something? Or, in a meeting, like, who wants to do this? And you're like, isn't that Betsy's job? Oh, she did. After a while, you're like, why am I putting in so much effort if clearly nothing happens to the Betsys of the world? So that can be like really, really important to someone's engagement, whether or not other people around them, you feel like they're as invested as you are. And finally, I have a best friend at work. And this is the weirdest one. And Gallup, in fact, gets a lot of questions and flack for this. But again, they've done the research. Like Gallup, they researched the bleep out of everything. And they've really found that having that meaningful contact with someone at work who, again, think of all the other things we've just talked about, cares about you as a person, who is probably invested in your development, and you really feel connected to them. I know for myself, I worked in a toxic work environment for quite a while, and I stayed there just because I had a best friend at work. I looked forward to going to work to see that person, and in fact, those people. And the rest, yeah, could go to hell. But like having that really important connection can really impact someone's engagement.
Indeed. And so again, moving into the growth area of the final 2 questions. So again, thinking about in the last 6 months, someone at work has talked to me about my progress. And so again, thinking about being able to have folks have that opportunity to talk about where they have grown, what they have done in the last 6 months, right? A lot of times, we have annual reviews, and those are the things that maybe those are the places we're having those conversations. Again, Gallup has found we need to be having those very specific conversations about progress at least twice a year. And so again, thinking about what does that look like? How do we work to incorporate these conversations in when we're meeting with our folks? And then the last question of the Q12 is, this last year, I have had opportunities at work to learn and to grow. And so really helping people reflect on what is it that they've learned and how have they grown in the last year, and how have we helped facilitate that? And again, if these questions we're thinking through either personally, like, I just don't know what that is. Again, taking some time for yourself to think about where you've learned and what you've grown in the last year. And then again, giving your people the opportunity to do that. And again, a lot of these things can be tied together. So as we're reflecting and thinking back on what all our team has done in the last year, again, really making the time and effort to share that back out with our team, right? To share where we've seen growth, what we have seen happen positively, Again, this doesn't mean we ignore places where there were challenge or things that could have been different or better, but we do very intentionally take the time to share, again, the things that have gone well, how we have grown with the people that we are leading.
Okay, and so we saved this for last to hopefully get you engaged in the engagement. But why all the talk about engagement? Like, we know engagement is important for students, but what's the benefit to you, to us? So again, Gallup survey study, engaged teams have 10% more customer engagement. Who are our customers? Students. How important is student engagement? Very. So if you went to administration and said, I have a way to increase students' engagement by 10%, they would listen. Engaged teams have 23% more profitability. And of course, but Anne, we work in nonprofits. You do, but that doesn't mean there's no money involved. It has to do with limited resources. Can we maximize those so we have more resources to go to the places that need to have those resources? I said resources like 10 times in that sentence, versus, oh my gosh, we don't have enough money for anything. So that is still very important. 18% higher productivity in sales. And what is sales in higher ed? Enrollment, right? Again, if you said, I know a way to increase sales by 18%, you would have people's ear. 14% overall higher productivity. So, and again, we don't have time to really go into the nuts and bolts of strengths here, but when you're working in your strength zone, you are working more effectively and efficiently than when you're not. So productivity goes up. 43% less turnover. We cannot afford to have turnover right now because how many of us, oh, so-and-so, Betsy's leaving or Susan's retiring. No, don't go, because the chances of us being able to hire someone to fill that position, tenuous at best, and then who gets to do that job? So we have to keep our talented people. And finally, 66% higher well-being for engaged teams. And how many of you feel well, just in general? Probably, like you have your good days and your bad days, but this year and a half, the pandemic, especially, everybody's well-being down. So by increasing engagement, we can increase our own sense and our team sense and our colleague sense of well-being.
So how do we do this, right? How do we think about, okay, these 12 questions, these things are all great. And yes, I'd love to do all of those, but I already feel overwhelmed. How am I supposed to add these 12 other things? One of the things that we have to pay attention to, and Anne and I have been doing coaching all across, all across the region with people from different institutions and different positions within all of those institutions. And we really do focus on this idea of habits. And the reason that we focus on that is because you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the levels of your systems. And so as we think about these lofty goals, this wanting to feel engaged, creating this culture of engagement to help our teams and ourselves feel motivated, we have to evaluate the habits and the systems that we have and that we are operating in every day. So one of the ways that we have for y'all to be thinking about that, and I'll let you.
Oh, sure. Yes, sorry. Like sometimes when it doesn't matter, technical glitch, but now we're on the correct slide. Yes. So if this is resonating with you and you're like, yes, what do I do? How do I do this? Like, we're going to talk about some next steps here, but we also really want to invite you to our Supervisor Strengths Institute that's starting next week, because we're going to go through everything that we're talking about here, but actually focus on how to implement it, because that's the important thing. I mean, we've all gone to webinars, conferences, and we thought, oh my gosh, this is great stuff. Can't wait to use it. And then we don't use it. So we really want to give people the opportunity, not just to duly noted, that seems important, but okay, how am I going to get there? How am I going to make sure that I'm actually increasing my own engagement, that of my teams, the people around me? Because I know if I can, it's going to make it better for everyone. So we're going to get into a little bit more detail about what that consists of later. But I just want to say that if you are feeling a little overwhelmed, like Alicia said, like, oh yeah, thanks for another big to-do list, we can help you get there. So no worries.
Indeed. And again, thinking about in this time together, we of course have given you again these very tangible things to be thinking about, but circling back to this idea of our subconscious and our conscious and how does this all play together? Again, this comes down to our idea to how we build our habits and what we are doing intentionally in our day-to-day. So as we talked about at the beginning, motivation isn't something you can thrust upon others. And honestly, motivation and willpower are overrated when it comes to this idea of building habits. Lots of y'all have probably heard of Atomic Habits has been a popular book that's been around. That's what that last quote was from James Clear. Charles Duhigg is another person in the habit realm. There's a whole bunch of folks, but we're not going to get into that nitty gritty today, but let's just leave it at motivation and willpower overrated. There are better ways to get things done. When we think about, again, building habits, the more that we can stack things, the more that we can create and bundle small habits to build effective systems. This idea of neurons that fire together, that wire together, fire together. We want to be able to build those neural pathways to really, again, help our conscious mind put those things into the subconscious, right, and make this change stick. Again, we think about this idea of goals versus habits. Goals are these lofty things that oftentimes we write down and maybe break in and we make them smart and those kinds of things. But if we don't create habits and systems to help us get to that goal setting isn't really that important. It's the steps that we take and the habits that we do to build that and make that goal sustainable. When we think about habits, a huge benefit of building habits that work for us, because honestly, everything that we do in life is just a series of habits, right? If your habit is to, come home, kick off your shoes, sit on the couch. I don't know that, if you have children, that's probably not part of your life, but again, when we think about, I want to get healthy, we think about, I have to create a new habit, right? I have to create a new habit of going to the gym. But we don't take into account that I need to change the habit that I already have, because you already have a habit. It's just shifting that and changing it into something that's going to serve us. The more that we can create these habits that serve us, the more we're able to allocate energy elsewhere, right? The more that we are able to think creatively and again, create really innovative ways and things to do what we want to get done. Again, when we build habits to take care of some of those things that are lower level, again, we have that ability to allocate energy in a different space. And then again, thinking about habits, the reason James Clear called his book Atomic Habits is because it's not one big thing. It is a series of small, tiny things. And so when we think about building these habits, when we think about, I'm sure, again, we all have interest in our lives of some sort, right? Either a mortgage that interest we don't want to talk about, or a savings account that does have really great, interest coming back. We want those compound returns, right? We want it to keep adding and growing. And so we want that positive change based on the habits that we're creating.
Definitely. And so when we talked earlier about creating the right habits and systems, really when we're talking about a system, it's just a set of connected things or devices that operate together. So for the most part, we have these individual habits, but connected, they are a system. So Alicia talked about the habit of going to the gym. That's really a whole system of smaller habits along the way. And you think about health in general, like what are you eating? What are you, when you have a break, are you watching TV and snacking? Are you going for a walk around the campus? And I know you're like, what break? What is that? But you get where I'm going with this. So, and habit can be an individual, like what are my habits and systems around holding my people accountable? What are my habits and systems around self-care? But it can also be the policies and procedures that we have within our department to get things done. When a student comes in and needs an ID, what happens? What's the system? And we're going to go into a little bit about how do you assess those systems, because energy is our most important resource, and we're constantly wasting it, and our energy is leaking out when we're doing all these things that don't help us directly get to that goal we set.
So how do we do that? How do we assess our system? So some of the questions that we would pose for you to be thinking about, and we're going to give you a tool that we'll talk about in just a second that you can use, but really taking time and setting this out. Maybe it's putting 30 minutes on your calendar right now. What actually helps you achieve your objectives? And that can be for you personally, that can be for your team, or like Ann said, that can be for your department. What are these things? What are these policies, procedures, habits, systems that we have that help us actually reach our objectives? And honestly, this is one of the things that's hard, but we have to take the time to do that, or we don't have the ability to make change. So what are the things that help you achieve your objectives? What are the things that waste your energy, either for yourself, for your team, or for your students? Paying attention to those pain points really can be an opening to make the change, to help, again, create this culture of engagement for ourselves and our teams, and therefore our students, right? Again, thinking about what do these pain points tell us, and really working to get unstuck from what they are telling, this just is the way that it is, right? This has always been this way, but really using those pain points to help us think creatively, to build new solutions, and really thinking about the 80-20 rule. So again, thinking about, this is an idea that comes from business, but that 80% of our impact of what we do comes from 20% of our efforts and the things that we put forth. So when we think about how do we assess our systems, we have to look at that 20% of what it is that we're doing that's making that 80% of impact. Anything else you want to add to that piece, Ann?
Well, and the fun thing about this is that if 20% of the things that you do make 80% of the impact, and we have limited time and resources, do we really need to do that other 80% of what we do every day? What are you talking about, Ann? That's insane. It's not actually, it's not insane. It goes against our culture. But when you focus on those things that are making the biggest impact, it also means that for that 80% of stuff that you're doing, that does help. But it's an incremental amount of help. And therefore, is it worth doing? And not even is it worth doing, but rather, do we have the energy or the time or the resources to do it? And in an ideal world, we would have all the people we need, we would have all the money we need, we would have all the programs and equipment that we need, but that's not where we're living. And if we could get 80% of our goals met, then all of them, I think we'd be pretty happy. But that means there's a bunch of stuff that we are doing that's not really adding a lot of value. So as you're assessing your systems, like Alicia said, what are we getting the most bang for our buck by doing? We keep those, and the rest, can we get rid of it? Can we tweak it to make it more impactful? And, I'm a big advocate, we're a big advocate of, let's get rid of the stuff that we don't need to be doing, but we just keep doing it because someone said we needed to do it at one point. We've just always done it that way. Or getting into talents a little bit, my talent really kind of likes doing it. So it's cool with spending a couple hours, looking up stuff or doing an Excel spreadsheet. But when I go back and look at it objectively, it's really not helping us get where we need to go. So the resource that Alicia talked about, and we'll give this to Cliff so we can send it out to you, is this daily habit log. And so what this is because we are on autopilot so much of the time, again, 95 to 99% of the time. And so when we think back over our day, we really don't even know what we've done half the time. Just like, oh my gosh, I got home, I hope I haven't killed anyone. Like you didn't, because had you run over someone, your conscious mind would have kicked in and, would have dealt with that situation. But we do so many things every day just on autopilot, and we have no idea whether it's helping us get to where we need to go or it isn't. And so this log is super important because it's helping me make the unconscious conscious. Because once you do that, like we talked about earlier, then the free will can kick in. And you can say, are these meetings that I'm having with XY elemental P, are they actually helping anything? Or are they just taking time away from actually getting done what needs to be done? And if so, how can I change that? And really here that, it's just what time did you do it, what the activity is, and what your energy rating is, because again, when you're working in your strength zone, it's a much better use of your energy typically than when you're working outside the strength zone. And your energy is really the important thing to look at over time. And also, because again, we do a lot of strengths work, how are your talents helping you do it? And how are they getting in your way? Because when your talent shows up in a way that's not being productive, it's actually showing up as a weakness. And again, this log is just really important because it gives you those data points to be able to assess and make changes to your systems that otherwise you don't even know where your energy is going. And so we always encourage people, and again, we don't have time to get into all the nuts and bolts about how do you make a new habit and all that sort of thing. But I will tell you that when you start any new habit, just 2 minutes a day. And so just set out time in your schedule, 2 minutes every day to start doing this. And eventually you'll probably just naturally take a little bit more time to do it. But just by doing that every day, you can create a good solid habit of thinking about where's my energy going? What am I actually spending time on? And is it helping me get where I want to go?
So as we work to wrap up our last couple minutes together, again, really thinking about, hopefully this has sparked some ideas of, something needs to change. Again, I'm feeling burnt out. I know my team is feeling burnt out. I want to create this culture of engagement so that folks are able to feel more motivated. Again, thinking about changing your systems. Part of our role as a leader is to help our team create new habits. And so again, we can't do that until we've thought about what are habits that are working, what are our systems that are working, how do we help our team create this culture of positive reinforcement, of sharing when we notice somebody does something well, right? Some ideas. When we think about habits, again, I would imagine you've probably seen some sort of how to create a new habit, maybe especially around, New Year's time, we see that a lot. Sometimes you have to start creating new habits and new systems by reinforcing with rewards. And rewards can mean a lot of different things, but just kind of keeping that in mind, that part of the habit loop is a cue, an action, and a reward. Our brain needs that to create a new habit. So how do we help create these new habits for our team? Again, really going back to this idea, we have to be clear. Brene Brown, of course, is who I would like to be when I grow up, but she talks about in Dare to Lead that clear is kind, unclear is unkind. And so as we are thinking about how we lead people, really keeping that in mind, that we have to be clear about what we need and what we expect from people. And we need to do that to and with and for ourselves as well. And then the last thing is we really need to work to be consistent. Again, it can be very challenging when we feel like we are running from fire to fire and just completely overwhelmed and unmotivated, maybe burnt out ourselves. But how do we work to do these things? Again, being clear, being kind, being consistent, working towards creating that change that we want to build for our team.
And the last tool we want to give you is this idea of implementation intentions. Excuse me. And there's been a lot of research around this. And essentially what this is a shortcut for your brain to make change easier. And they have found that when you have people make an implementation intention, they're over 60% more likely to follow through with it. So for the next month, and this is basically a fill in the blank type thing, for the next month, I will engage in at least 5 minutes of whatever it is. We just talked about this daily log. So 5 minutes of logging my time and my energy, how I'm using it, how my talents are showing up each day by filling out that log that Anna and Alicia gave me at this time 4:45, I'm going to do it right before I leave in this place, in my office, because that's where my stuff is. And using this method, which again, sitting at my desk, just writing in the form or putting it in a spreadsheet, whatever you want to do. And you can really do this with any habit you want to create. It's just kind of a fill in the blank situation. So you can use it for yourself, for your team, give it to colleagues.
Absolutely. Do you want to go back to it real fast, Anne?
Yes.
If you, again, you can always watch the replay, but if you want to snap a picture of this, if you didn't have time to fill one out for yourself, grab a quick picture. Again, we want you to have a tool to walk away with. Again, research shows that the simple act of writing this out helps you achieve it. So again, if it's using the time log that we're going to share with you, if it's if it's making one positive comment to a team member each day, right? Again, really just thinking about what it is that you're going to do. Again, hopefully you've had some time to snap that if you didn't get a chance to write it down. So again, thinking about all of this, we know that it's kind of information from a fire hose. We wanted to provide good context and again, some tools for you to walk away with, some questions to be asking yourself. But again, like Anne mentioned earlier, if this feels overwhelming or if it feels like, oh my gosh, this is the exact thing that I need in this moment, we are starting our fall Supervisor Strengths Institute. It kicks off next Tuesday. What it is 8 weeks of leadership training. And so that 8 weeks is about an hour each week. It's an online module that you will participate in each week. We will also have 9 group success and accountability calls. So that is where the cohort will come together. We'll talk through issues or challenges that you have had in the previous week. Again, having us there for coaching and accountability, and also having the creative input from, again, the folks that are moving through the cohort with you. Those calls will be Tuesdays at 1 p.m. this fall. If you're really interested in doing the Institute, but you already have, some sort of standing meeting at that time, we do record those calls and you just kind of miss out on that live piece. But even if that's where you're at, we do you are also afforded 3 individual success and accountability calls with either Anne or myself to really, again, how are you implementing this? What is going on? How can we coach you individually in this space as well? You also get the brand new Clifton Strengths for Managers report. So if you've never taken your Clifton Strengths, or even if you have, this is the only report that you can purchase that gives you your top 10. It also gives you very tangible, specific items that you can try in your strength zone that will help you be a better supervisor, leader, colleague. And then the last piece of this is that you also do have access to a private Facebook group for the cohort, again, for more community, asking questions, getting some maybe more real-time feedback as the week goes on. Again, as we think about the online modules, again, we move through those together to talk about those topics, but you also have access to those modules for a year after the training, because again, we know it's a lot to take in 8 to 9 weeks. So we, of course, want to see you. We would love to have you join us for the Institute. Again, it kicks off next week. If we were to price all of these things out individually, that cost would be, pretty close to $2,500. But the price for you is $595. Again, that's includes 8 weeks of training, a year of your online modules, 3 coaching and accountability calls, and then the weekly coaching and accountability calls with your cohort as well. Because we are here, we know we're almost at time. If you do sign up by Wednesday, you'll also get a bonus 1-hour coaching call. So another value of $150. So with all of that, we are so glad that you joined us today. Our contact information will be coming on the screen soon. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Anne or I. Follow us on the socials. Anne, anything else you want to wrap up with?
No, you did a great job.
Oh, I think.
And we would love to have you. We have 16 people signed up so far. We'd love to have a few more. The more the merrier, because it is really, like, of course, Alicia and I are there to coach you and help lead you. but other people bring such a richness of experience and support as well. So, and if you have any specific questions about it, our contact information is there. You can go to the website to get more information. And Cliff, do you want to wrap us out, or?
This was fantastic, guys. Thanks very much. Yeah, I mean, like over and over again throughout that presentation, I recognized so many parts of my own approach, especially as someone whose mindset always tries to go, if I just put a little bit more effort into this, I can effort my way through this instead of thinking about maybe the better habits that I could be setting up for myself. So this was fantastic. Thank you so much. Thanks to everybody who joined us. I'm going to put another call out for the Leadership Institute. If this spoke to you today, you guys should really consider it. I'm going to put a shout out again to our convention registration. November 10th through the 12th, we'll be in Branson for the MCCA annual convention. Anne and Alicia are going to join us. I believe we've got some breakout sessions that are in the planning stages right now. So in person, you'll get to meet some of these folks and collaborate and brainstorm and do all of it. So thanks very much to Anne and Alicia once again. Thanks to Katie, our comms director, who's also on the Zoom. And we will be putting out some more information about the convention. We'll be putting out some more information about some future webinars real soon. So keep an eye on your inbox, everybody. And thanks again.